This podcast is part of E2C Network, where we share the whole Auburn experience.
Hello and welcome to War Horses, the only college equestrian podcast that got real busy on Saturday and didn't put out any of the meet matchup head-to-head graphics. Sorry about that. I'm your host, Auburn Elvis, but let's talk about some college equestrian. All right, so we had some rough weather moving through the East Coast here. Some of the meets had to get moved around or delayed and all that. So we're going to talk about them. And yeah, let's go ahead and do that with some meet recaps. And what we'll end up doing is we're going to talk about these in groups of meets, not based on when they happen, but where they happen. So the first one we'll look at are the set of meets up in Delaware between South Carolina and Minnesota Crookston, hosted by Delaware State. So first off, we have South Carolina at Delaware State. Lots of new riders in this one. About half of the head-to-head matchups were involved at least one of the riders that I didn't have stats for or didn't have a lot of stats for. Overall, South Carolina had the advantage, which is kind of what you would expect with the bigger program like them. Let's see how everything went. In fences, that went 4-1 for South Carolina. Horsemanship went 3-1 for South Carolina. So in that first half, they had the 7-2 lead, and they were fully in control. Then in equitation on the flat, that went 5-0 for South Carolina, so they got the sweep there. And then reining, that was a 2-2 tie. So we saw Delaware State do pretty well in reining, but that ended up with a final score of 14-4 in favor of South Carolina. This was a nice road win for the Gamecocks. Things had to be shifted around, like I said, because of the weather, but they took care of business just like you would expect. For Delaware State, there was an outside chance that they maybe could have gotten the upset, but once Carolina got rolling, the writing was on the wall there. Next meet to look at is South Carolina versus Minnesota Crookston. Now this was a 4-on-4 meet. Fences went 2-2, so pretty good job there for the Golden Eagles. Reining went 2-2 as well. So all right, again they're doing okay. That was a halftime score of 4-4. Then in the second half, in the flat, South Carolina, they have a good flat team. They won that 4-0, so they swept that. And then horsemanship was a 2-2 affair as well. So that ended up making the final score, 12-6. So that made the final score 12-6. This was a solid neutral site win for South Carolina. They were trying out several new riders just to see how everything could get going. But this was really what they needed. They needed a good competitive meet that they could probably outdistance the other team, no problem. They did that. Although Minnesota Crookston, this is probably their best performance in a meet, maybe ever. They stayed with a larger program up until the final events. So good job to the Golden Eagles on this one. And then lastly, in this group of meets, we have Minnesota Crookston at Delaware State. Don't have the individual stats on this because they haven't posted the stat sheets, and I tried to find it online, couldn't find it. I did find the final score. It was a 15-4 win for Delaware State. This was a good conference win for them. It helps them get ready for some of the more challenging teams in the ECAC. For Minnesota Crookston, again, they showed that they're improving. A couple of years ago, they would have had trouble getting 1 or 2 points. Now they're getting, 4 here on the road at Delaware State. So even though this was a loss, this was another sign of improvement for their program. Okay, so now let's talk about number 1 TCU's trip through the Deep South. The first meet we'll talk about, TCU at Auburn. This happened on Friday. So yeah, let's jump right on into it. The flat started out the action. That ended up going 2-2. Both these teams are a bit mysterious in the flat, so wasn't sure how this was going to go, but both of them getting 2 points, that's probably a good indicator of how good they are relative to each other. Over in reining, this one also is sometimes hard to predict for these teams, but Auburn took control of the meet here in this one. They won the event 3-1, and that gave them the 5-3 halftime lead and put them in control. So all they had to do was take care of business, and they would get the win against the number 1 team. Let's see how the second half went. In fences, this is really Auburn's bread and butter in most meets, so they were looking for a lot of points there. TCU did pretty well to limit the damage. They only allowed Auburn to win the event 3-2, so the score going into the final event was was 8-5, and that meant with those two ties, Auburn only needed 2 points to clinch the victory, and Auburn got, they won 3-2, so made the final score 11-7. So nice win for Auburn, especially considering it was a number one team in the nation. Now you do kind of expect that a meet between two teams that are closely, evenly matched like this, that it's probably going to go to the home team. So while this is technically an upset, this is pretty much what you would expect. Over we go to Saturday. TCU went to Georgia. Now, in the returning statistics, like I talked about in the preseason, Georgia is pretty close to Auburn. They're good in the jumping seat and not so good in the Western, or a little shaky in some of the Western ones. So I thought this one was going to be about like what we saw at Auburn, but it was a little different. Things started out in flat. Georgia won that 4-1. Now, Georgia is really good on the flat, better than Auburn even, and certainly better than TCU, 4-1. So yeah, right out of the gate, the Bulldogs are in control. And then reigning, again, this is a Western event. TCU didn't do well against Auburn, but here against Georgia, they won the event 3-0. So that right there evened things up at the half. I think Georgia probably, with that flat start, they would have expected to be a little bit, have a little bit of a lead. They did not have that, so they were right there in it. Yeah, that reigning surge is what basically did it. With TCU, that kept them in the meet and kept them right up with Georgia. So over we go to fences, and oh boy, you would expect Georgia to win this, kind of like Auburn did the day before, but TCU won this one 3-2. And yeah, this was the big turning point in the meet. When that happened, Georgia was in trouble. And sure enough, on the horsemanship, TCU won that one 3-2 as well. Georgia did okay to stay close to them. It's hard to beat TCU in horsemanship, and that made the final score 10-8 TCU. Yeah, this was a really good bounce back win for TCU. Anytime you go on the road against a good team and get a win, you need to celebrate that. I don't care, what the situation is. Going on the road is difficult. So for TCU to get the win at Georgia like this, we really didn't expect that. Even though they're the number one team in the country, I did not expect that. And I'll tell you, nobody in the country could have gone on the road to Auburn and Georgia, or two teams about that level, and gotten 2 wins. And most teams wouldn't have even gotten 1. So just to get 1, this was a big win for TCU. For Georgia, it's got to be a little disappointing. Like I said, you would expect Georgia to pull the upset in this case. They didn't. Started out real strong on the flat, but then they let TCU get back in it with reining, and then fences they underperformed, and then they couldn't catch back up in horsemanship. So yeah, you really, really, really want to win all of your home meets this year. I'm just telling you, if you see a team that doesn't win a home meet, that's a red flag. It means they're probably not gonna be the national champion. They're probably not gonna be one of the top teams in the country when all is said and done. Now, this is real early for Georgia. Maybe they'll rebound, but I'll tell you, historically, if you lose at home, you're not going to be the national champion. If you rely on statistics like I do, I'll say that the odds are not real good for Georgia right now. So we'll see if they can turn it around. So those were all of the dual discipline meets that happened this past week. So now let's look at the single discipline teams. And here is where I'm going to have to eat my words from last week's episode. So here we go. All right, so the first one we'll look at is a big one. College of Charleston at Lynchburg. Now, if you remember last week, I went on and on and on and on about how talented, how loaded Lynchburg was. I mean, I'm talking about how they got girls who won't even be dressed out who could beat you, Well, apparently College of Charleston doesn't listen to this podcast because they didn't get the memo on that. They showed up thinking they were good enough to win, and let me tell you, they were. So in fences, they won that 4-1 for College of Charleston. And in flat, now that one did go 3-2 for Lynchburg, but the damage was done. Yeah, they got some ladies who can ride some horses over in Charleston, y'all. Now they did a little bit of riding last year, but they didn't have enough meets to, I think, qualify as a full-time team. So this is really their first year for real. And boy, they have just come out of the gate charging. And yeah, I mean, my goodness, it was this was so unexpected. So, number one team in the nation goes down at home. And again, if you remember what I was saying, if you lose at home, it doesn't look good for you. Yeah, they lost 4-6 at home to College of Charleston. So, yeah. Then we got to see a meet between Centenary University and College of Charleston, and didn't know what to expect because, again, Charleston came out of nowhere. Maybe Centenary's got a bunch of ringers on their team that we ain't never heard of. Now, I did say that Caroline Berg would probably lead the Cougars to victory. Turned out Caroline didn't get her point, but the Cougars did win, so I was right about that part. Fences was 2-2, and flat went 2-1 for College of Charleston. So that the final score in the meet was 4-3. So this was a 4-on-4 meet instead of a 5-on-5. Maybe if it had been 5-on-5, College of Charleston's depth would have made that margin a little bit bigger. But good job for Centenary to keep it close. I mean, they got a couple of points there. Look at that. They got 3 points. They almost tied it up, and who knows what happens when it goes to tiebreakers. Good win for Charleston. They're undefeated. They're 2-0 now. But also good for Centenary here. They showed out. One of their riders, Caroline Mancini, she got the flat MOP, so they got talent over there as well. All right, next meet to look at, Centenary, they had to turn right around, face the host, Lynchburg. In my prediction, I said, no chance here. Lynchburg is just so amazing. Well, okay, Lynchburg did win. They won 7-2, but the Cyclones got 2 points, but that's okay. A 7-2 win is a big win, so Lynchburg righted the ship here. They beat Centenary, and so they kind of salvaged the weekend by getting this one. Caroline Mancini, she got another MOP. This time it was over fences instead of flat like that previous meet was. So they got some talent over there. So we'll see how Centenary does. This could be a pretty good first season for them. Now the next meet is Centenary versus Bridgewater. So that one is going on about right now as I'm recording. So what I'll do is I'll wait at the end of the episode. I'll record that one separately and drop it in right here now. All right, I'm back. The Centenary Bridgewater meet has finally finished. Basically, they haven't posted anything, so I had to watch the live stream. So I did that, and let's see. Fences went 3-2 for Centenary, and then the live stream cut out during the flat when the score was 6-2. So that could be the final, or there could be some more points. But either way, Centenary won that meet. Centenary has defeated Bridgewater. So good job to the Cyclones. Okay, so that is all of our meet recaps. Now, we got to look at some rankings. I mean, we had so many upsets and unexpected results this week. We got to see how that impacted the official Auburn Elvis College Equestrian rankings. First, we're going to do the dual discipline. Number 1 is TCU. Now, even though the Horned Frogs lost at Auburn, their rebound win at Georgia was so impressive that they're going to retain the top spot. I considered them moving down, but I think any team in the nation, if they'd gone to Auburn and gone to Georgia, they would not have won both of those. They probably would have lost 2. So the fact that TCU got one of those is pretty good. And if you think anybody else would have done better than that, you're crazy. All right, nobody's doing that. So I'm going to keep TCU at number 1. Number 2 is SMU. So the Mustangs are 0-1, but I'm still going to keep them at number 2 because they did look so good going over to TCU last week. They barely lost on the road. Also, they're loaded with talent. So I'm going to keep the Mustangs at number 2, and that's just how we're going to do it. And I know a lot of y'all are like, what about Auburn? Well, number 3 is Auburn. Now, the Tigers, they defended their home turf against a loaded TCU team. Not every team in the nation can do that, as we saw. And so I am going to reward the Tigers' achievement there. I'm going to move them up above Texas A&M, and even though we haven't seen the Aggies ride yet. So Auburn fans, I would say be happy, but don't get too comfortable here because you never know what's going to happen. For right now, Auburn's number 3. That means number 4 is Texas A&M. Again, the Aggies haven't ridden in any meets yet, so they did get jumped by Auburn, but they're going to have their chance to show their stuff as the season goes on, starting this week. Oh, my dog is barking in the background. Ignore that dog barking in the background. Number 5 is Oklahoma State. The Cowgirls have also not ridden. They're in that same wait-and-see boat, so we're just going to keep them right here at number 5. Not keep them, we're going to move them up because Georgia has moved below them. Our number 6 team, oh gosh, all right, I got to pause that. All right, I'm back. Apparently she had things to say about Georgia. The Bulldogs have dropped a spot. They lost at home to TCU. We kind of expected they were going to get that win. They did not. They got a little bit of work to do. And they're going to have to do some work if they want to move back up in the rankings any. All right, number 7 is South Carolina. I considered bumping the Gamecocks above the Bulldogs with those 2 wins, but frankly, the competition that they beat is not nearly as tough as what Georgia faced, so I'm going to hold them where they are here, and we're just going to see how they do at home when they face Auburn here in another week and a half. Now, the rest of the teams have also not seen action yet, so this is going to be unchanged from the preseason and week 1 rankings that we had last week. Number 8 is UC Davis. Hello. The Aggies remain the final team that would get to Ocala if the playoffs were held today, but again, they haven't ridden, so we don't really know much about them. Number 9 is Baylor. The Bears had their scrimmage against Tarleton this weekend, but we still got to see how they're going to do against NCEA competition, so they stay at number 9. Number 10 is UT Martin. The Skyhawks had an internal scrimmage, I think, this weekend as well, but since we haven't seen them start riding yet, they're just going to stay at number 10. Okay, now let's talk about the single discipline rankings. Again, with the meet going on right now, it hadn't been decided. That's going to impact how the middle and lower part of the rankings go. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to wait and hold off on that. I'll record that later, drop it in right here. Boy, I have no idea what happened to Lynchburg, but they did not look like the world beaters that we thought they would be in the preseason. And because of that, we have a new number 1 team, and that team is College of Charleston. Am I overreacting by jumping the Cougars from 8th to 1st? Maybe, but until somebody builds a better resume than they've got, the Cougars are the team to beat in this sport right now. And at number 2, we have Sweetbriar. The Vixens have yet to compete so far this season, but maybe that's a good thing. They did see Lynchburg get stunned in their first meet, so maybe Sweetbriar will be on notice. At number 3, we have Lynchburg. The Hornets drop below the top 2 spots, probably for the first time in like 4 years maybe. And that home loss to College of Charleston was just a stunning thing that they're just going to have to put behind them and move on with the rest of the season. Number 4 is Swanee. The Tigers haven't ridden yet, so they get bumped down by Charleston's vaulting up into first place. Number 5 is Dartmouth. Same thing for the Green. They haven't ridden, but because of Charleston, they slip a spot. Number 6 is Centenary.
It's a twister! It's a twister!
The Cyclones lost at Lynchburg, but then they turned it around and they beat a talented Bridgewater team, so they are number 6. Number 7 is Sacred Heart. The Pioneers haven't ridden either, so we're going to have to wait to know really where they fit in, but for right now, they're number 7. And number 8 is Berry. No meets for them, so we're just going off of their returning talent, and with other teams around them winning and losing, this is kind of where they end up. And number 9 is Bridgewater. The Eagles gave up a winnable home meet against Centenary, and they slipped to number 9 as a result. Well, that is all of this week's rankings. Okay, with the rankings out of the way, now let's talk about some meet previews. So this weekend reminded us that you can't put a lot of faith in predictions and statistics. You got to go out and ride these meets and see who wins. Even still, there are some upcoming meets this week, and here's what we think that we know about these teams and what we think will happen. First off, SMU at Texas A&M. We saw the Mustangs almost upset TCU on the road. Can they get the job done against the Aggies? That might be asking a little bit too much, even from a team as talented as SMU is. I think the Aggies are going to win this one in a close one. Oklahoma State at TCU. Our first Big 12 conference meet is a rematch of last season's conference championship. We saw TCU struggle against SMU at home, but I still expect them to win this one over the Cowgirls. UT Martin at South Dakota State. The Skyhawks will be favored in this one, but the Jackrabbits can be pretty tough at home. The winner of this one will take the lead in the ECAC conference race, and I think that's going to be UT Martin. Fresno State at South Dakota State. The Bulldogs had a rough season last year, so they would really love to start off with a nice road win, and I kind of think they're going to get it. I'm predicting Fresno State in this one. And then the final meet there is Fresno State going up against UT Martin. So this is going to be a great indicator of which of these teams is going to make their case for getting into the, one of those final playoff spots that I always talk about. Yeah, this is a neutral meet, so we'll see how this goes. Probably going to be 4-on-4, just to, they won't have as many horses. So either team could really win in a 4-on-4 because you don't have to have as much depth. The loser is still going to have some opportunities to kind of show that they deserve to make it to Ocala, but it is not going to be easy after losing this one. And I think the winner is going to be UT Martin. Okay, I think they got a few more good riders. I don't think they have to go as deep as they would if this was a 5-on-5. So I think the Skyhawks will get it done at a neutral site. Now, let's see. Oh, we do have one more. It's a single discipline meet. We only got one single discipline meet this week coming up. It's Swanee at Dartmouth. Now, I have these two teams pretty close to each other in the rankings, but this one's at Dartmouth, so I think the green is going to have the advantage. Whoever wins this is probably going to climb the rankings and challenge Lynchburg in one of those top 4 spots, and I think it's going to be Dartmouth. I think Dartmouth is going to win at home. All right, so those are all of our upcoming meets. We are getting into the season fast and furious here. It's going to be exciting. We've already had some monumental upsets, or a monumental upset, and another upset that wasn't technically an upset, but it was an upset to me. I didn't think Georgia was going to lose. But yeah, that's just the way it is. You got to get out there and prove it. And also, we're so early that even if you have a team that underperforms, you can turn things around. We've seen that with TCU in years past, where they had just a terrible fall, and then in the spring they were just world beaters. So yeah, this is great, this is fun, and man, this is exciting. I love to see the new teams, Charleston, Centenary, coming in here and just shocking the world. So yeah, we like that. We like to see that. So, and hopefully we'll see more of that. But for now, that's all of this episode. I am your host, Auburn Elvis. Thank you very much for listening, and war horses.
Thank you for tuning in to today's episode on the E2C Network. On your way out, I want to remind you to stop by e2cnetwork.com. It's your one-stop shop for all our content across our podcast, YouTube channel, and much more. To stay up to date with us, make sure you're following social media accounts such as Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. While our content here may always be Auburn sports heavy, if it's orange and blue, it's what we do. War Eagle.